Have you ever said to your child, you knew the consequences, you know the rules? Have you said, we've had this conversation 100 times, you know what's going to happen? Or maybe you said, don't lie, just own it. Or when they start to blame, you've said, why don't you just own it? Like you did your part. And that may lead you into a lecture or a long story about how you did your part and you owned it. And I think that this comes because we feel like this is all about their character. But really, I want you to see today that this is also about their capacity. And in order to develop the character that we so want to develop in our kids, we have to work within the capacity of what they have and how to help them to do better. It's actually a myth that they should know better. I believe and work from the place of if they knew better, if any of us know better, then we do better. And so it's a process, right? I love Dr. Russell Barkley. He's one of my go-to people about all kinds of things with executive functioning, ADHD. And one of the things he says that I think is really important to keep in mind is that kids that have executive functioning challenges, and if your child has had trauma, has attachment disorders, has ADHD, neurodivergence, even autism, high functioning autism especially, like these executive functioning lags, challenges are going to show up. And it shows up in there as a performance problem. It's not a knowledge problem. So executive functioning challenges are a performance problem, not a knowledge problem. So what does that mean? It means that they know the rule. Like they can tell you exactly what the rule is right before they break it. They can tell you in the counseling office, believe me, they can give all the right answers to what to do if somebody bullies them or what they can do if they get really angry. All the right answers. But they cannot consistently execute the behavior in real time. That means as soon as they leave my office and they get frustrated because they can't get a treat on the way home with their mom, that they're going to handle their anger in a completely different way because they don't know how to execute it in that moment. In the counseling office, they know how. In the story that was told, they know how. At school, after or before, like when they're in a social skills group or whatever it is, like, yes, they have the knowledge. They understand the rules, but there's a gap there between cause and effect and what's actually they're going to do in that moment. Knowing is stored in the brain, but doing is managed by the brain. And those are not the same system. I want to say that again. Knowing is stored in the brain and doing is managed by the brain. To own it, a child has to use these executive functioning components. To own it, they have to be able to pause impulse. They have to be able to tolerate shame and frustration, even with themselves. They have to be able to reflect on their behavior, which is a high functioning skill. They have to be able to link the action and the consequence. And that is a hard one in itself, right? Because a lot of times our consequences for what they did are not linked. And I've done several videos about that, why it's so important that the action and the consequence are linked and that there's not big gaps, because there's already a gap in their ability to be able to do that. They can tell you what they did was wrong, and as they're working on the consequence, they're going to be just mad about the consequence and not really understand the link between what they did and why now they have to do these chores or they have a phone taken away or whatever it is. They have to have the ability to use language to repair or fix, to make things right, to fix it. And they have to have the ability to plan a different choice next time. And not just plan it, but then be able to execute it. So that's 6 or 7 different executive functions at once. And executive functioning is meant to work together. It's not like, okay, well, I'm going to just use this executive functioning right now. But there's lags in different ones at different ages, different paces, what skills have been worked on, what haven't. And so those are 6 executive functioning skills that our kids tend to really struggle with. And if you have a trauma impacted child or a neurodivergent child, stress, anxiety, even excitement can turn these offline. So when they're not in the thinking part of their brain, which is a lot of the time, then these are not even accessible to them, because remember, they're in 2 different places. So we are asking for a skill, an executive functioning skill set from our kids, but then we're judging it like it's a moral failure. You're a liar. You're blaming everybody else. You're not owning it. And that's character. And I want to talk about how, like, most of the parents I work with are not trying to shame their kids. And I know that in those moments when we go offline ourselves, that there are times when we probably do. I know as a parent that there were plenty of failures, right? Plenty of times you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that. I was so upset. And we have a fully developed brain, so hopefully we know how to do all these things of owning it and making repair. But shame also, with a lot of kids, especially if they have trauma or if they have had a lot of repeated behaviors where they're constantly in trouble, like at school, maybe even at home, it's like their name is said a lot, like stop, don't. Especially I see this with kids that have escalated more into aggression. There's shame is there. It's part of the component that is inside of them. And it really hinders this ability for your child to be able to own it, because shame produces a threat response. Like as soon as they know you're in trouble, it's kind of like when you were a kid, if someone said that you had to go to the principal's office, like we automatically feel like we're in trouble. Or if somebody says, I need to have a meeting with you, or I want to talk to you, we're like, what is it? Right? And that's an immediate threat response. It doesn't mean that something bad happened to you. It's kind of natural for our bodies to have that response. But when they are actually in trouble, and then we're going to talk to them about this, like their defenses are already up, and defensive-ness is a big part of it. And that's where the blame shifting comes in. It's very hard to own it when you really want the person to understand that you were trying and all these other things were happening. But also when you can't really self-reflect, it's also really hard to see where you were in that space. And so then we see lying and or that shutting down. I don't know, I can't remember, or stories that get us off track of what we're talking about. And it's not because they're trying to manipulate you. It's because their survival brain is protecting them in those moments, because the executive functioning isn't there to really process it. And so how we approach this with kids is really, really important. A child that feels unsafe, and that's not because you are unsafe, it's because they feel unsafe. It could even just be from their own behaviors. They cannot be accountable. Safety comes first, and then responsibility grows. So I'm going to reframe this for you, that ownership is built and cannot be forced. When we try to force it, we're trying to point out that they're lying, or they're shifting the blame, or all of those things. It goes right into that shame response, And so then it's kind of like forcing it. And ownership is going to grow from these steps. Safety first. The child has to feel safe. Like, not just like I'm safe at home, I can have a big fit, kind of safe. But they have to start to feel safe as a person. And I have a lot of help around that. If you have kids that are aggressive, acting out, lashing out, hurting people, hurting themselves, they're not safe inside. So even if they tell you like, I don't feel safe at home, or I don't feel safe, I only feel safe with my friends, or whatever, it's like no, like you don't feel safe in yourself. So we have to help you to create a safe home first. And then part of that is regulation, which starts with co-regulation, learning how to get ourselves calm, and then building structure. We build the scaffolding and the structure that's needed so that they can learn these skills. And this is even if they're teenagers, we have to do this. And then connection comes, and the skill building comes as well. A lot of times we want to start right at skill building, and we don't have these other things in place. And sometimes the other things are there. We have safety for the most part. Now we need to build regulation. But I really think they go hand in hand, because if you have kids that are having huge meltdowns, and maybe they're not hurting anybody in the family, but their meltdowns are disastrous, and they're not handling the level of frustration, they're lying, you feel like you're being manipulated. I still would say that safety has to be built. It's a solid foundation, and we have to build this in stair steps, and we can't just jump to the top level. In our level of needs as humans, we don't have reflection and the ability to better ourselves until all of these lower needs are met, and that's way at the top. And yet we want our kids to have that right away. Oh, they just have poor self-esteem, or they have no idea how they're affecting other people, things like that. It's like true. It's true, because we have to build those lower levels. Without these stones in place, accountability collapses, and so does our trying to help them to like stop lying or own it or make repair. We don't demand the top rung up here. We have to build. So I want to give you some clear, practical parenting moves. First, you're going to want to regulate, and then we're going to talk later. So there's no lessons that are going to be taught in the middle of a meltdown, and very few that are ever taught after. A lot of parents want to like, oh good, we made it through that. I got them calm. Now I want to talk to them about it. And a lot of that is so that we feel better about it. Maybe we want them to apologize to us. Maybe we want them to feel bad, or maybe we just want to feel better because the whole thing was so hard. It's understandable. But there's not going to be lessons that are learned during that. Instead of why did you do this, we have to let them kind of calm down from it. If you know something that happened at school, or something was taken, or something was broken, if you know what happened, then instead of asking why did you do this, or what did you do, or what happened at school today, when you already know, you're gonna start with what you know. You're gonna say, hey, I heard this happened. Tell me your part. Tell me your side. That right there like invites them to own their part of it. Now, when they start in, they're gonna tell you everything else about it, and the story may be all over the place. They have a very hard time sequencing their story, okay? Let them tell it, because you already know what happened, and that's not the point of this. They need to be able to say their part, so they may have hit somebody on the bus, but they're going to tell you what all the other kids were doing on the bus, and they're going to tell you what other people were doing that was probably worse than what they did in their minds. And then you can ask them like, well, where were you when that happened? Like, tell me where you were sitting. Tell me what you were doing. What was hard right before this? Like you're helping them to key in on where they were. And I sometimes will even say, you're not in trouble. I'm just trying to get a picture of what happened. Where were you? So, and I don't let them go on and on and on about everybody else. I will sometimes say, okay, I have some questions. So I'm just wondering, like, where were you? Where were you sitting? Who was next to you? What happened right before you punched Johnny? You know, and see what they remember. Well, he said blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, that must have been really hard. What were you feeling? Where did you feel that? So you're getting them tuned into themselves, because they're almost outside of some moment of being able to coach them, help them with the repair. Like after they've been heard, after you've helped them to see that, it's like you can ask questions like, what could you do to make this a little better? I remember one time in my office, I was going through this with a boy that did actually hit somebody on the bus. And I said, when you think back about all that happened, because he got in trouble at school, which is usually if something happens and it's outside of your sphere of control, it didn't happen in your house. I let that happen. Like, what did they do at school is one of the things that, like, so what happened then? Like, so what happened at school? Even if it's a lot of like, it was so unfair because I was the only one that got in trouble. Maybe they were the only one that actually hit somebody, right? And so don't dive into that story with them. Just let them be like, oh, okay. So if you could do it all over again, what would you do next time? Like, would you do it differently? What would you do? And I remember I was talking to this one boy, and he just said so quickly, he's like, yeah, I would have hit him sooner, right? Like, wouldn't have let him hurt me first, you know? And I said, maybe, but you got in a lot of trouble for hitting. Is there anything that you would do differently if you didn't feel like hitting? Like if you were able to not hit, like what else, what would be better? Or was there anything else you could have done before you got so mad that you hit? So just reinforcing kind of honesty over perfection and getting them talking about it and not being so judging about the way they're saying it, you know, and that takes some brain work on our end. I don't know how many stories I've heard, especially from my own kids, where you're just like, yeah, sure, right. Or us jumping into like, well, I'm gonna dive in and I'm gonna find that kid's parent and I'm gonna talk to them. It's like they're just telling a story, and we don't even know what parts of it are true or not true, what parts are just from their perspective. So that's where we want to start bringing them into where they were standing and where they were sitting, and that's interesting. Like, and I don't like to spend a lot of time like asking them, what do you think that person was feeling? Because they're not ready for that yet. They're not even really in tune with what they were feeling. That's why they can hurt people, because it's not a big deal. Like health, executive functioning takes a long time to develop. And when you have kids that have their brains are wired differently, and they're not learning those skills maybe as naturally as kids that don't have ADHD or don't have trauma, then, you know, this is going to have a 30% delay. So in their mid-20s, you may start seeing some of the executive functioning skills to start to develop more clearly on their own. The progress is very slow and uneven. There's going to be times when they've got it and times when they don't. But we know that being consistent and helping them to build those skills and having it be consistent at your house will really help, because that's what helps the most when kids are at schools that are very consistent and they have a good team around them, and it really helps at home as well. And it doesn't have to be as much work as a whole team of people at school. I can help you to do that. You being coached can really, really help a lot too. You're not just correcting behavior, you're helping their brain to function better and reach the potential that it has. There may be some kids that there's areas of executive function they may never really understand. It may always be a challenge for them. But as they get older, like they will have these skills also that start to kind of come back around. I have several kids now that are in their mid-20s and moving moving in, and some of them in their 30s. And it's been amazing to see different ones, a couple that had some learning disabilities, and seeing now their need in order to do their jobs and to raise their family, and the need to have structure and to have to use these skills, and some of their struggles in it, but they have been. So keep in mind, kids don't learn ownership from pressure. They're not going to learn it from this pressure. They're not going to learn it from being forced. They learn it from us creating that safety and that structure and lots of practice, that it's okay. It's okay. And it's never too late to turn things around. We don't shame responsibility into children. It doesn't work for us either. We build the skills that make it possible.